The stars above the Valari ship looked calm, silent, and endless. But inside the ship, chaos filled every deck. Warning lights flashed red, sirens screamed, and smoke curled from the cracked control panels. The crew ran from station to station, trying to keep the ship alive. The captain, a tall, silver-skinned alien named Vethra, stood at the command post, her eyes fixed on the main display. Enemy ships were chasing them, large, dark, and fast. The Draxian Dominion had found them again. "Shields down to 20%, shouted her first officer. "Divert all remaining power to engines," Vethra ordered, her voice calm but tight. The ship shuddered as another blast hit the rear hull. Metal screamed. Panels sparked. One of the engines flickered out completely. The Valari had been running for days, crossing system after system, hoping to lose their hunters. They were diplomats, scientists, not soldiers. Their ship was a research vessel, not a warship. The Draxians didn't care. They destroyed anything that refused to join their empire. Vethra stared at the fading power levels. They would not survive another hit. There was only one option left: send a distress signal. Maybe anyone would hear them. "Prepare the beacon," she said quietly. The communications officer, trembling, nodded and began typing commands. The distress beacon was an ancient piece of technology, a last resort message that spread across nearby star systems. It carried a simple message: help requested. Non-combatants under attack. The signal would be sent in universal code, understandable by most intelligent species. But as the officer activated it, a small error message blinked on the screen. "Translation error," he said. "Should I fix it?" "No time," Vethra said. "Send it anyway." The beacon flared to life and vanished into space, a pulse of light carrying their plea for mercy. Vethra leaned back in her chair, exhausted. Maybe someone would come. Maybe no one would. Either way, it didn't matter. Minutes passed. The crew waited in silence as the enemy ships grew larger on the display. There were 4 of them now, each bigger and stronger than anything the Valari could fight. The Draxians sent a message. A voice like grinding metal filled the bridge. "This is Commander Jarg of the Draxian Dominion. Surrender your vessel. You have no allies here." Vethra didn't respond. She looked at her crew, faces pale, eyes wide. The silence was answer enough. The Draxian voice chuckled. "Then you die alone." The first blast tore through their rear hull. The ship shook violently. Alarms wailed, and the lights flickered out. The crew clung to their stations as the ship began to spin. Smoke filled the air. Vethra tried to stand but stumbled. They were done. Then the scanner officer gasped. "Captain, multiple warp signatures detected." Vethra blinked. "Draxian reinforcements?" The officer shook his head, disbelief in his voice. "No, humans." Everyone froze. Humans? The Valari had heard of them. Newcomers to the galactic stage. Curious, unpredictable, sometimes reckless. But they were still small, barely out of their home system. What could they do against the Dominion? The main display flickered and refocused. Space rippled, and then hundreds of bright lights appeared. One after another, enormous shapes burst from warp. A fleet of colossal ships, steel-gray hulls, angular designs, and blazing engines. Each bore a symbol unfamiliar to the Valari, a blue and white emblem shaped like a circle with a single star in the center. The humans had arrived. Their formations spread out quickly, efficient and tight. Dozens of warships took position between the Valari and the Draxians, forming a protective wall. Smaller human craft darted between them, scanning and preparing weapons. The scale of it was terrifying. It was not a rescue. It was an armada. Vethra stared in silence. "That can't be right," she whispered. "Humans don't have this many ships, do they?" Her first officer didn't answer. Nobody did. A voice came through the comm channel, deep, calm, and clear. "This is Admiral Carter of the United Terran Defense Fleet. Valari vessel, we received your call for aid. You are now under human protection." Vethra blinked. She hadn't even spoken yet. "Admiral Carter," she said hesitantly, "there may be a mistake." "We didn't save it for later, Captain," Carter interrupted gently but firmly. "Your ship is damaged. We're moving you behind the line. Medical teams are on their way." The channel closed. Before she could respond, several human ships broke formation, moving toward them with astonishing precision. Tractor beams locked onto the Volari vessel and began pulling it backward into safety. Medical drones were already launching, small pods racing through space to dock with her hull. Then, as if on cue, the Draxian ships opened fire. Brilliant green energy blasts tore across the void. But the human ships didn't flinch. Shields flared blue, weapons hummed, and a moment later the Terran Armada fired back. It was not a chaotic volley. It was surgical. Every human cannon fired in unison, striking exact points on the Draxian ships. In less than 10 seconds, 2 enemy vessels exploded. Another spun out of control, burning. The bridge crew of the Volari ship watched, speechless. This wasn't what they'd expected. Humans were supposed to be small, disorganized, and inexperienced. Yet here they were, an entire fleet, fighting like a single living being. Vethra whispered softly, almost to herself. They came because of a signal. Because they thought we called them. Her first officer turned toward her, eyes wide. Captain, we didn't call for them, did we? No, Vethra said quietly. We sent a general distress beacon. But the translation system was malfunctioning. The realization hit her like a shockwave. The broken translator hadn't sent help requested. It must have sent something else. She turned to the comms officer. What did the beacon actually say? The officer hesitated, checking the screen. The message reads, calling human command for joint defense response. Silence filled the bridge. Every crew member stared at her in disbelief. They hadn't asked for help. They had accidentally called the humans to war. Outside, the battle raged. Human warships formed an iron curtain around the Volari vessel, their cannons flashing against the darkness. For the first time in her life, Captain Vethra didn't feel fear. She felt awe. The stars had changed tonight. The galaxy had just met the humans, and the humans had answered a call that was never meant for them. The Volari ship drifted quietly behind the human lines, its damaged hull held together by human engineering drones. They moved with mechanical grace, patching holes, sealing leaks, and cutting away twisted metal like surgeons. Inside the bridge, Captain Vethra stood staring at the massive human flagship ahead, a colossal vessel bristling with weapons, its hull scarred but steady. Its name glowed faintly across the side. UTS Resolute. She could feel the power behind that name. Captain, said her first officer, his voice low. They're requesting visual contact. Vethra nodded nervously. The screen flickered, and the face of a human appeared. He was older, with gray hair and sharp eyes. His uniform was simple but neat. There were no grand symbols or royal insignias, only the blue and white emblem of a single star within a circle. This is Admiral Carter, the human said. You're Captain Vethra of the Volari Union vessel Seren Dawn, correct? Yes, she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Admiral, I must apologize. The signal you received, it wasn't meant for your forces. It was a standard distress call. Our translation matrix malfunctioned. Carter didn't react with anger or confusion. He just nodded slightly. Understood. Vethra blinked. You're not upset? The Admiral leaned forward slightly, his expression unreadable. Captain, distress is distress. Whether or not it was meant for us, doesn't matter. Someone was in danger. We had the power to respond. So we did. His tone was calm, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. Behind him, the bridge of the Resolute was a hive of quiet efficiency, officers giving orders, screens flickering with battle data, no one panicking, no one shouting. Vethra had seen many fleets before. None of them worked like this. Admiral, she said. You brought an entire armada, he gave a faint smile. It's protocol. When a defense call is received from a friendly code, we respond in full force. We thought you were already under attack. But you didn't even confirm who we were, she said softly. Carter's eyes hardened slightly. When someone asks for help, Captain, we don't waste time asking if they deserve it. The words hit her harder than any explosion. There was something terrifying about that certainty. Not arrogance, not aggression, but a deep, unwavering belief. Before she could respond, the ship's sensors blared again. The Draxian ships were regrouping. Dozens more had warped into the system. Their fleet was now larger than before, stretching across the stars like a swarm of predators. Carter turned away from the screen, giving short, precise orders. All fleets defensive pattern Theta 9. Prioritize non-combatant protection. Hundreds of human ships began to move, spreading into a vast shield wall. The Valari ship floated safely behind it, surrounded by dozens of human frigates. Vethra couldn't look away. Every motion of the Terran fleet was deliberate. Ships turned and repositioned in perfect synchronization, their movements smooth like a single organism made of metal and light. The Draxians opened fire again, but the humans were ready. Energy beams struck human shields, flashing bright blue. A few shields flickered but held. The counterattack came seconds later, coordinated and devastating. The human fleet didn't fire wildly. Every cannon, missile, and railgun hit exactly where it needed to. Every cannon, missile, and railgun hit exactly where it needed to. The Draxian formation began to break apart, but they were not beaten yet. From behind their lines, a massive ship appeared. The Draxian command cruiser, easily twice the size of the Resolute. Its hull was black and pulsing with red energy veins. It released a deep, echoing sound that vibrated through every nearby ship. "Energy spike detected!" shouted a human officer in the background. "They're charging a planet buster cannon." Carter didn't flinch. "All ships, focus fire on the main gun housing. Disable it before it fires." Vethra watched as wave after wave of human projectiles streaked toward the enemy ship. Explosions rippled across its surface, but the massive cannon still charged, glowing brighter by the second. She turned to her own crew. "If that weapon fires, we're finished." The human admiral seemed to know it too. He leaned forward, eyes cold. "Bring the Resolute to forward position. Prepare the Ramfield array." The bridge went silent. His officers hesitated, exchanging quick, uneasy glances. Then one of them said quietly, "Sir, the array hasn't been tested at full power." Carter didn't look away from the display. "There's a first time for everything." The Resolute surged ahead, its engines burning white-hot. Around it, smaller human ships fell back, giving it space. The entire Draxian fleet turned its weapons toward the lone advancing human flagship. The Resolute didn't stop. Vethra's eyes widened. "He's going to ram them." "No," said her first officer, staring at the readings. "He's charging something." A blinding pulse of blue light erupted from the front of the human flagship. Not a beam, but a wave, invisible and massive. Space itself seemed to twist. The energy hit the Draxian ships like a silent explosion. Their weapons flickered, their shields collapsed, and one by one they went dark. The command cruiser's cannon overloaded and exploded, tearing the ship apart in a brilliant white flash. When the light faded, the battlefield was silent. The Draxian fleet was gone. Only drifting wrecks and dying sparks remained. On the bridge of the Valari ship, no one spoke for a long time. They simply watched as the Resolute slowed to a stop, its hull scorched and cracked but still intact. Finally, the human admiral's voice came through again, calm as ever. "All units begin rescue operations. Prioritize enemy survivors if they're not hostile. No one dies alone today." That sentence made Vethra's breath catch. Even now, after all the destruction, after the enemy had tried to wipe them out, the humans were still saving lives. She sank slowly into her chair, whispering, "They're not warriors. They're protectors." Her first officer nodded, eyes wide. "Captain, do you realize what we're seeing?" "Yes," she said quietly. "We're seeing why the universe should fear them, and why it should never forget them." Outside, human ships moved among the wreckage, guiding survivors, towing damaged vessels, offering medical aid to those who had attacked them minutes ago. The galaxy had seen many conquerors, many empires that sought power. But this was different. The humans had answered a call that wasn't theirs, and now everyone who had witnessed it would never see them as small again. The stars were quieter now. The echoes of battle had faded, leaving behind drifting debris and the faint glow of dying fires. The Valari ship hung silently within the protection of the Terran fleet, its hull repaired enough to survive. Captain Vethra stood on her bridge, staring out through the viewing port at the shattered remains of the Draxian Armada. Pieces of metal, wrecked ships, and frozen bodies floated slowly through space. The humans were already working, tugging wreckage aside, collecting survivors, and stabilizing the area with a level of organization she had never seen before. She had expected them to celebrate their victory, to roar in triumph after destroying a powerful Dominion fleet. But instead, the human channels were calm. There were no cheers, no boasts, only quiet voices giving medical reports and rescue orders. They had fought like predators, yet behaved like healers afterward. "Captain," her first officer said softly, "we're being hailed again. The human admiral." Vethra nodded, and the display flickered to life. Admiral Carter appeared on screen, looking as calm as ever, though the faint lighting behind him revealed a bridge filled with tired faces. His voice remained steady. "Captain Vethra," he began, "your ship's condition is stable, but I recommend you keep your engines offline until our engineers complete the energy grid synchronization. We'll handle the debris field. You should rest," Vethra said. "You've been fighting for hours." He gave a faint smile. "We'll rest when the last life pod is safe, not before." There was a pause, and Vethra studied him carefully. He didn't speak like a soldier who had just won. He spoke like someone who carried the weight of every lost life, enemy and ally alike. She could almost see the sorrow behind his calm expression. "Admiral," she said carefully, "why do you risk so much for strangers?" Carter's gaze didn't waver. "We don't risk for strangers, Captain. We risk for life." "That's enough." Vethra felt a strange chill at those words. She had heard of honor, of alliances, of treaties forged by convenience, but this was different. The humans didn't act from pride or ambition. They acted from something deeper, something almost frightening in its simplicity. Before she could speak again, another officer entered the human admiral's frame and whispered in his ear. Carter nodded slightly, then turned back to her. "It seems your situation is worse than we thought. We've detected another incoming fleet, larger, faster, and heavily armed." Her heart sank. "Draxians?" "Yes," Carter said grimly. "They must have received a distress signal from their own before they fell. We estimate 2 hours until contact." Vethra froze. Her ship was half dead. The Terran fleet had already suffered damage. Another full Draxian fleet would crush them both. "Can you hold them off?" she asked. Carter looked away for a moment, considering his answer. "We'll do what we can. But if they bring a carrier swarm, this position won't hold." The Volari captain swallowed hard. "Then you should retreat. You've done enough. Leave us. Save your people." He looked back at her with eyes like steel. "That's not what humans do." The communication ended. 2 hours later, the Draxian reinforcements arrived, and the void erupted again. They came in waves. Black ships pouring from warp like a storm of locusts, surrounding the human defensive line. Missiles and plasma lances filled the darkness. The Terran fleet answered immediately, moving as one. Their formation split into several layers: frontline destroyers absorbing fire, cruisers providing covering barrages, and support ships keeping shields alive with precise energy relays. It was beautiful and terrifying all at once. Vethra stood transfixed as the humans fought. Every explosion seemed to push them harder. When a ship went down, the rest closed ranks. When the enemy broke through, someone filled the gap before it was too late. But even the humans couldn't hold forever. One of their heavy cruisers took a direct hit and vanished in a blinding flash. Then another. The line began to buckle. The Draxians pressed harder, confident that victory was near. On board the Resolute, alarms blared. Carter gripped the edge of the tactical console as his officers reported status after status: damage, losses, energy depletion. The fleet was bleeding out. Then something unexpected happened. A series of strange signals began to appear across the sector. Warp signatures, hundreds of them. For a brief moment, both sides paused. No one could tell who was coming. Vethra's eyes widened as her sensors adjusted. "Admiral," she whispered, "those aren't Draxians." Her voice trembled as hundreds of new human ships tore out of hyperspace. Massive carriers, colony transports, freighters, even mining vessels. Not military ships, not at all. But every one of them bore the Terran flag. The Admiral's comm opened across all channels. A new voice crackled through, full of static and determination. "This is Captain Singh of the merchant vessel Atlas Dawn. All civilian convoys in nearby systems have answered your signal, Admiral. We brought what we had." Vethra could hardly believe it. "They came to fight?" Carter's voice was steady. "They came to stand. The civilian ships began to form ranks. Cargo freighters turned into armored battering rams. Mining vessels used their drilling lasers as weapons. Even small transports took formation, shielding others from enemy fire. The Draxians hesitated. For the first time, they didn't understand what they were facing. This wasn't a military counterattack. It was something far more dangerous. It was unity. The human armada surged forward, old ships and new warships and workers alike, fighting side by side. The Draxians tried to overwhelm them, but their formation broke under the sheer will of the humans. Every explosion lit up the dark. Every voice on the human channels rang with stubborn defiance. Vethra watched in awe as the tide turned again. The Draxian ships began to retreat, their confidence shattered. Admiral Carter's voice came through one last time, quiet but firm. "If you ever wonder who humans really are, Captain, remember this. We don't wait for orders to help. We just show up." As the last Draxian ship fled into warp, the human fleet stood victorious once more, not because they were the strongest, but because they were the only species that refused to abandon hope. Vethra leaned back, her eyes wet, whispering to herself, "They're more than warriors. They're a storm wrapped in mercy." And far beyond the stars, in hundreds of systems, word of what happened began to spread. The story of the human armada, the one that answered a broken call and refused to back down, would echo across the galaxy for centuries to come. The Draxians' retreat should have brought peace. It didn't. Space was quiet again, but it was the kind of silence that made people afraid to breathe. The Terran fleet floated in formation, lights dimmed, damage control teams still moving across scarred hulls. The Valari ship, patched and stabilized, lingered nearby. Captain Vethra stood at the viewing window, watching the human ships. Their hulls bore scorch marks, some still venting gas, yet none had drifted away. Every ship stayed in perfect position, like soldiers standing watch at a funeral. Her first officer joined her. "They've won twice now," he said softly. "Why do they still act like they're waiting for another battle?" Vethra didn't answer right away. She watched a group of smaller human ships move among the debris, collecting survivors. Not only from their own side, Draxian escape pods were being towed in too. The humans rescued their enemies as carefully as they did their own. It made no sense. Finally, she said, "Because they know war never ends when the shooting stops." Her officer frowned. "You think the Draxians will come again?" "I think the Draxians will remember this, and when they return, they'll bring everything they have." Before he could reply, the comms console blinked. "Incoming hail, Terran flagship." Vethra took a breath and accepted. Admiral Carter appeared once more, his uniform burned and soot-stained. Even through the holographic shimmer, he looked exhausted. Behind him, the bridge of the Resolute was dim, but alive, crews still at their posts, still working. "Captain Vethra," he said, his voice low. "Your ship's systems are holding. That's good news." "You should rest, Admiral," she said. "You've done more than enough." He smiled faintly. "I'll rest when we're home. But we're not done yet." Vethra's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Carter gestured to a holo map beside him. "We've been tracking Draxian fleet movements. The ones that retreated are regrouping near the edge of the Helion Rift. If we let them recover, they'll be back within days. And they won't be chasing just you next time." "So you plan to strike first?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, but not to destroy them. To end this war before it begins." The idea startled her. "Admiral, you've already done enough damage to their forces. Why risk more lives?" Carter looked her directly in the eye. "Because if we don't, the next message won't be a distress call. It'll be a warning. And it'll come too late." The human admiral's logic was cold, terrifyingly clear. He wasn't fighting for pride. He was fighting to make sure no one else ever had to. Within hours, the Terran fleet began to move again. Hundreds of ships, military, civilian, repaired, damaged, all falling into formation. The Valari ship was asked to stay behind, but Vethra refused. "My people owe yours our lives," she said over the comms. "We'll go with you." Carter's face was unreadable. Then he nodded once. "Then let's make this count." The fleet vanished into warp. When they emerged, the darkness of space seemed to ripple with energy. The Helian rift stretched before them, a region of chaotic gravity and shifting storms of plasma. It was said that even automated probes rarely survived passing through. But deep within its swirling glow, thousands of Draxian ships gathered like a hive, preparing to strike. The Valari crew gasped as their scanners picked up the sheer scale of it. The Draxians had assembled a war machine larger than any fleet in known history. Vethra turned toward her screen. "Admiral, you can't fight that. It's suicide." Carter didn't flinch. "We don't need to fight all of them. We just need to remind them who they're fighting." The human ships began deploying strange metallic spheres, thousands of them, across the edge of the rift. Vethra had never seen this kind of technology.
What are they doing?
Her sensors flickered as a new kind of energy field began to form between the human ships and the storming edge of the rift. The spheres linked together, creating a massive lattice of light and magnetism. The human admiral's voice came through the channel. "Operation Veilstorm, initiate." The entire region shook. A wave of pure white energy burst from the Terran fleet, racing outward across the void. It didn't destroy, it rewrote. The gravitational currents of the rift began to shift, twisting violently, pulling at the Draxian ships trapped within. Their engines screamed in protest, their formations broke apart, and within minutes, chaos erupted. The Draxian fleet wasn't being fired upon. It was being swallowed by the rift itself. "Impossible," whispered Vethra's science officer. "They've altered the gravitational polarity of an entire region." Carter's voice came again, calm and final. "We don't win wars by killing more. We win by making sure no one dares start another." One by one, the Draxian ships vanished into the rift's storming heart, dragged down by their own engines. Then, as quickly as it began, the storm settled. Silence fell once more. The Terran fleet held position, battered and scorched, but alive. The stars were still again. Vethra stared at the display, stunned. "They could have wiped out the entire Draxian species," she said softly. "But they didn't." Her officer nodded slowly. "They chose mercy." Carter's face returned to the screen. "The Draxians will remember this day. They'll remember that we could have ended them, and that we didn't." He paused, then added quietly, "Mercy makes people think. Fear just makes them hide." As the Terran fleet turned for home, the Valari ship followed. Behind them, the Helian rift shimmered with faint blue light, calm for the first time in centuries. Captain Vethra watched the human ships through her viewport and finally understood. They weren't just a military power. They weren't conquerors or saviors. They were something far more dangerous to the galaxy's old order. They were a species that refused to play by its rules, and somewhere deep in her chest, among the fear and awe, a spark of hope began to grow. The return to normal space was like waking from a dream, or maybe a nightmare that hadn't quite ended. The Terran fleet emerged from warp, battered, bruised, but victorious. Their ships moved in a slow, careful ballet, each one guiding another home. The Resolute, though scorched and scarred, still led from the front, its engines burning faint blue. Around it drifted ships of every size, warships, freighters, colony transports, even mining vessels. Every one of them bore the same symbol, the circle and star of Earth. Captain Vethra stood silently on her bridge, watching the sight unfold. She had seen fleets before, vast armadas from empires older than her species. But never like this. Never so unified. Never with such quiet resolve. These humans had come together not out of conquest, not out of profit, but out of something she couldn't quite name. Her first officer approached quietly. "Captain, long-range channels are lighting up. The other powers? They're watching. The entire galaxy knows what just happened." Vethra didn't need to ask how. Every listening array, every spy satellite, every relay station across the sector would have caught glimpses of the battle in the rift. The energy signatures alone would echo through space for decades. "Do they believe it?" she asked softly. Her officer hesitated. "They believe enough. The Draxians have gone silent. The Zorn Confederacy is moving troops toward their borders. Even the Neutral Council has called for a summit." Vethra nodded slowly. "The galaxy just met the real humans." Hours passed before she received another signal from Admiral Carter. His voice came through the static, calm as ever. "Captain Vethra, we've set course for Sol. You and your crew are invited to accompany us. There's something you should see." She agreed without hesitation. The journey took only a few days through Terran warp corridors. But those days changed everything she thought she knew about the humans. Every system they passed through was alive, colonies glowing with cities, mining outposts orbiting frozen moons, and great orbital docks that looked more like living hives than stations. And everywhere she looked, she saw something remarkable: cooperation. Humans worked like they breathed, together. Soldiers and engineers, civilians and traders, all part of the same pulse. The Valari had always seen them as unpredictable, emotional, even primitive. But now Vethra began to understand their chaos wasn't weakness. It was life. When they finally reached Sol, she was speechless. The human home system was unlike anything she had imagined. Earth shone below, blue and green, covered in ribbons of white cloud. Massive orbital rings surrounded it, and hundreds of ships drifted along steady traffic lanes. The fleet slowed as it approached the largest station she had ever seen, a colossal structure hanging between Earth and its moon, shaped like a starburst of silver metal. The voice of a human controller came through the comms. "Welcome home, Resolute. The fleet is cleared for docking. Civilian ships, proceed to your assigned berths." As they docked, Vethra caught sight of thousands of tiny lights moving across the station's hull. Repair drones, shuttlecraft, and people in exosuits all working together, patching and rebuilding before the ships even came to rest. When she finally set foot inside, she was met with a wall of sound, cheers, applause, voices calling out names. Families reunited, engineers hugging pilots, medics running to greet soldiers. She'd seen victory parades before, but this wasn't one. This was relief. Humanity wasn't celebrating domination. They were celebrating survival. All of it, theirs and others. Admiral Carter met her in one of the docking corridors. He looked tired, older somehow, but his eyes still carried that steady light. "Welcome to Earth's heart, Captain," he said simply. "Welcome to Earth's heart, Captain," he said simply. "I've seen many homeworlds," Vethra replied, glancing through a nearby viewport at the blue planet below. "But none that feel like this," Carter smiled faintly. "That's because this isn't just one world anymore. It's all of us. Earth is our beginning, not our border." They walked together through the corridors of the great station. The walls were covered with murals, images of people, ships, and moments frozen in time. But what struck her most were the faces. No single type, no single form. Humanity's diversity stretched beyond comprehension, and somehow it all worked. They entered a viewing chamber filled with diplomats, officers, and civilians. A holographic projection of the Helion Rift flickered in the center, showing the battle data in intricate detail. Around it stood representatives of other species, cautious, curious, and clearly unnerved. The humans had invited them all. A voice spoke from the stage, a woman in a simple white uniform. "To those who question humanity's intentions," she said, "look at what we built. Look at what we chose not to destroy. We don't seek power. We seek balance. We don't want to rule the galaxy. We just refuse to let it fall apart." Vethra turned to Carter. "You think they'll believe her?" He shrugged slightly. "They don't have to. They just have to remember." Silence filled the room as the hologram shifted, showing not the destruction of the Draxian fleet, but the rescue efforts that followed. Dozens of Terran ships towing escape pods, medics treating Draxian wounded, drones carrying supplies. Gasps rippled through the alien envoys. They had expected vengeance. They saw mercy. When the meeting ended, Vethra stood at the viewport again, staring down at the blue world below. "You've changed everything," she said quietly. "The balance of power, the old alliances, the way we see war, all of it." Carter shook his head. "No, Captain. We didn't change the galaxy. The galaxy just finally noticed we were here." Outside, the stars shimmered faintly. Somewhere, deep in that darkness, a Draxian signal pulsed weakly. Not a call for conquest this time, but something else. A single message, repeating in the shared language of the stars, requesting negotiation with human command. Vethra exhaled slowly, a small smile touching her lips. "They're afraid of you." "Maybe," Carter said, "but fear fades. Understanding lasts longer." As Earth turned slowly below them, the Valari captain realized the truth. Humanity wasn't just another rising empire. They were a promise, unpredictable, dangerous, compassionate, and utterly unstoppable, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The weeks that followed were strange ones for the galaxy. Rumors spread faster than ships could travel. The name Terran was whispered in council chambers, broadcast on news channels, and argued over in every major species network. Some called the humans saviors, others called them madmen. But no one, not even their enemies, could ignore what they had done. Captain Vethra's ship remained docked within Earth's orbit, surrounded by an ocean of metal and light. She had expected the humans to retreat into isolation, perhaps to bask in their new fame. Instead, she saw them doing the opposite. The Terrans were expanding, repairing damaged ships, building new ones, sending convoys of aid to border systems. Everywhere she looked, they were reaching outward. She found herself standing on one of the massive station's observation decks, staring down at Earth. Its swirling blues and greens were hypnotic. She had never seen a homeworld so alive, so filled with movement and noise and hope. Her first officer joined her, breaking her reverie. "Captain," he said quietly, "the galaxy is calling this the human armistice. The Draxians have agreed to peace talks." Vethra turned, her expression unreadable. "Peace talks? After centuries of conquest? They don't understand humans at all." He tilted his head. "You don't think they'll honor it?" "They'll come, yes. But not because they want peace. They'll come because they're afraid. Fear is temporary." She looked out at the distant stars. "The Draxians will test them again. And when they do, the humans will answer again. That's what frightens me most." Later that day, a message arrived from Admiral Carter himself. It was simple as his messages always were. "Meet me on the surface." Vethra took a shuttle down to Earth. The moment she stepped through the atmosphere, she felt it. The pulse of life, so dense it almost hummed in her bones. The shuttle descended over glittering oceans and continents laced with lights. Cities bloomed like constellations. But it wasn't just technology that caught her attention. There was music. Everywhere, music. They landed near the coast of what her map labeled as New Pacifica, a city that stretched from mountain to sea. Carter waited for her at the landing pad, not in uniform but in a simple jacket, hands clasped behind his back. "Welcome to Earth," he said, smiling faintly. She stepped out, taking in the salt air, the smell of rain, the distant sound of waves. "Your world is beautiful," he nodded. "It's loud, chaotic, stubborn, but it's ours. This is what we fight for." She followed him down a walkway overlooking the ocean. Small ships dotted the water below, some fishing, some ferrying supplies. Children played near the shore, and the sound of laughter carried on the wind. It was peaceful in a way she had never imagined possible. "This is what the galaxy doesn't see," Carter said quietly. "They see our fleets, our weapons, our defiance. But this," he gestured at the horizon, "this is why we build fleets at all, so people can live without fear." Vethra studied him for a moment. "Do you really believe peace is possible? After what you did to the Draxians?" Carter smiled sadly. "Peace isn't something you believe in. It's something you build over and over every time someone tries to tear it down." As they walked, they passed a memorial overlooking the sea, a massive ring of dark stone engraved with thousands of names. At its center burned an eternal flame, flickering gently in the breeze. Vethra paused. "You're fallen?" "Yes," Carter said softly. "From every war, every generation. We add new names after every battle." She traced one of the engravings with her fingers. "Do you ever run out of space?" He looked at the flame, eyes distant. "When we do, we build another ring." They stood there in silence for a long time, the wind carrying the quiet sound of waves against stone. Then Carter said, "You should know something, Captain. The Draxians aren't the only ones who've sent envoys. Half the galaxy wants to meet us now. Some to ally, some to study us. Some to stop us before we get too strong." "And what will you do?" she asked. He gave a small shrug. The same thing we always do. Listen first. Prepare second. Hope it doesn't come to the third. Vethra smiled faintly. And the third? He looked at her, his expression grave. We fight. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting the sea in gold, the Valari captain realized she was standing at the edge of something much larger than a war or even an alliance. The humans weren't just another power. They were a force that changed everything they touched. In the following days, the galaxy began to converge on Earth. Fleets from a dozen civilizations arrived in orbit, their representatives descending to meet the Terrans. The peace talks began under the banner of the United Council, a neutral gathering that had never before hosted humanity. Inside the grand hall built for the event, Vethra sat beside Carter as leaders from across the stars argued, debated, and postured. The Draxian delegate, a tall, crimson-scaled figure, stood before the assembly and bowed stiffly toward Carter. "We came to make peace," he said. "But understand, human, we do so because we cannot afford another war." Carter inclined his head. "That's a good start. You'll find that peace is cheaper than fear." Laughter rippled through the human side of the room, but there was no mockery in it, only quiet confidence. Hours turned to days, and the talks continued. Slowly, cautiously, agreements began to form. Trade routes reopened, ceasefires held, old grudges were set aside. When it was over, the Draxian envoy approached Carter privately. "You could have destroyed us," he said. "Why didn't you?" Carter's answer was simple. "Because one day, someone else will send a signal. And when they do, I'd rather you answer it with us than against us." When Captain Vethra heard those words later, she understood something profound. The humans weren't trying to conquer the galaxy, they were trying to teach it how to be better. And maybe, just maybe, they were succeeding. That night, as she looked up at Earth's sky, filled with satellites, stars, and ships crossing in silent arcs, Vethra whispered to herself, "They don't just survive. They transform." And far above, in the endless dark, the stars seemed to shine a little brighter, as if the universe itself was finally paying attention. The stars looked different now. Maybe it was imagination, or maybe the galaxy itself had changed. Word of what happened in the Helian Rift and on Earth spread faster than even human signals could carry. Every system, every species had heard the story. How humanity had answered a call not meant for them and stood against an empire that had never known defeat. For the first time in 1,000 years, there was no major war. The galaxy held its breath. Captain Vethra's ship, the Seren Dawn, had been repaired and upgraded by human engineers. It looked stronger now, sharper edges, reinforced hull plating, and a hybrid reactor that pulsed with both Valari and Terran design. The humans had insisted on it. "If you're going to travel with us," they'd said, "you should be able to keep up." She smiled every time she remembered that. Now she stood on her bridge, looking out at the quiet void beyond Earth's orbit. She had been invited to witness something new, something humans called the Assembly of Dawn. Even after all she'd seen, she wasn't sure what to expect. "Captain," her first officer said softly, "the human fleet is readying for departure." "The transmission just came in," she nodded. "Patch it through." The image of Admiral Carter appeared once more. He was in uniform again, clean and pressed, the scars of battle long healed but not forgotten. His eyes still carried that same steady fire. "Captain Vethra," he said, "glad you're still with us." "I go where the story leads, Admiral," she replied with a small smile. "And humanity is a story no one can look away from." He chuckled. "Then you're about to see the next chapter. Set your course for the Arcturus Gate. We're going to meet the future head-on." When the human fleet jumped, it was like the stars themselves were bending to make way. Hundreds of ships entered warp in perfect formation, with the Resolute at the center, leading them into the unknown. The Valari ship followed close behind, its sensors wide open. Hours passed as they crossed the outer systems. Then the Arcturus Gate came into view, an ancient construct of impossible scale, older than most known civilizations. It hung in the void like a shattered crown, its surface cracked and cold. For centuries, no one had dared activate it. Legends said it was built by the first travelers, long before the current empires had even formed. Some called it a gateway to new galaxies. Others called it a tomb, but the humans saw it as something else, an opportunity. When they arrived, the Terran fleet spread out around the structure, scanning, probing, analyzing. Drones drifted through the broken rings, sending data back to the Resolute. On the Valari bridge, Vethra watched in fascination as the readings came in. "This technology predates all recorded galactic history," her science officer whispered. "It's alive in a way. The gate's energy core is dormant but not dead." Vethra turned toward the main display. "The humans mean to activate it, don't they?" Her officer hesitated. "Captain, if they do that, we don't know what could happen. The entire sector could collapse." She smiled faintly. "You still don't understand them." "The risk is the point." Moments later, Carter's voice echoed through every channel. "All ships, this is Admiral Carter. The Arcturus Gate is older than memory itself. No one knows who built it. But we believe it leads somewhere beyond the mapped stars. Today, humanity takes its next step. If you don't wish to follow, no one will fault you." Vethra didn't even hesitate. She opened her channel. "The Valari Union stands with you, Admiral, always." His voice softened. "Then let's see what's on the other side." The gate began to stir. At first, it was just a vibration, a low thrumming sound that seemed to come from inside the bones. Then came the light, faint at first, then growing until it filled the void. The cracks in the massive structure began to glow blue, then white, as energy raced through its ancient veins. The darkness of space lit up like a sunrise. "Energy levels spiking," a human officer reported. "She's waking up, sir." The center of the ring flared and a rift opened, a swirling tunnel of golden light twisting endlessly into the unknown. Every sensor screamed, every warning blared. Yet the humans didn't flinch. Vethra stared in awe. "They're really going to do it." Her first officer swallowed hard. "Captain, what if they never come back?" She smiled. "Then they'll still have gone farther than anyone ever dared." Admiral Carter's voice came one last time. "All Terran vessels engage warp alignment. Set destination Arcturus Gate. Let history remember that we were never afraid of the dark." And then they moved. The first Terran ships entered the gate, their hulls vanishing into light. Then more followed, hundreds of them, their engines leaving silver trails behind. The Resolute was the last to go. Just before it entered, Carter's voice came through a private channel to Vethra. "Captain, if you ever doubt what we are, remember this moment. We were the species that saw the void and decided it wasn't big enough. Then the Resolute vanished into the gate." Vethra's crew waited in stunned silence. The light began to fade, the energy readings dropping to almost nothing. The gate hung still again, quiet and ancient as before. "Did they make it?" her first officer whispered. Vethra looked at the lingering light in the center of the gate, a faint pulse, steady as a heartbeat. "Yes," she said softly. "They made it. Somewhere out there." Weeks passed, and then months. No signal came through. The galaxy debated endlessly. Had the humans perished, or had they truly crossed into another realm? Empires argued, scientists speculated, priests preached. Then, one quiet night, the Arcturus Gate stirred again. The light returned, faint but unmistakable. A signal burst across every frequency, written in every known galactic language, and several unknown ones. Vethra was the first to receive it. She read the message twice before she smiled, her eyes glistening. It said only 3 words: "We found others." The galaxy erupted in chaos and wonder, but Vethra just leaned back in her chair, laughing softly through her tears. Humanity hadn't vanished. They had gone further than anyone ever dreamed, and as always, they had found someone else to help, and somewhere beyond the edge of known space, the Terran fleet sailed on. Explorers, warriors, and dreamers, blazing new trails into forever.